Let me just start off by saying, whose idea was it to start eating this, or even this? Like, what part of this particular animal makes you want to eat it? Whose idea was it? I completely get that, like, human beings must consume everything. They have to shove everything in their giant mouths, but maybe there are certain things we probably shouldn't be eating, and those are just two perfect examples. Like, I get the cow and why you would eat it, or even a chicken, but something that's in the sea that looks absolutely hideous, I don't think I have an appetite for it. Having said that, I'm probably gonna eat some shrimp fried rice later. Anyways, all jokes aside, in today's video, I actually want to do something that I've wanted to do now for a few months. I just haven't really gotten around to it. I'll be brutally honest. I know we're uploading like 4 videos on a weekly basis, but even that is very fatiguing, especially, handling the 2 jobs and, the family and everything. I just rarely get an opportunity to actually like sit down and just talk about something that is really interesting to me. Sometimes I have to like cover news or, things. I have to just give my personal opinion on something that's relative. Whereas in this one, I don't really necessarily think it's relative, but it's just something fun that I thought we would do. We would take a look back at some of the coolest Haslab projects that we've had in the past and whether they're actually holding their value, not because we're scalpers or not because we're trying to resell anything, but just out of pure curiosity. I'm genuinely interested in seeing whether they've dropped in price or they're going back up, or what the case may be with each individual Haslab project, because every single one is definitely different in its own right. And I wanted to just do a quick rundown on some cool Haslab projects that we've seen in the past from Hasbro, and how they're doing out in the market. And I should reiterate, I'm not going to cover every single Haslab project because that would be like an astronomically long video. I'm also not going to go into too much detail because most of us are pretty familiar with all of the projects, but I'll just kind of briefly go through the Haslab and then how it's doing like on eBay or some of these third-party websites, and whether they're holding their value, because I think some people are very interested in that. They don't want to pay for something and then have it drop like immediately after they purchase it. It makes them wonder whether they should have held out or waited for a third-party seller to post their Haslab project. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at some Haslabs, see if they're going up in value or going down, or just basically staying where they were originally at. The first one that I wanted to take a look at is obviously the newest one. We're looking at the Haslab, or the newest one that people have in hand. That is the Haslab Giant Man Marvel Legends action figure. And yes, we get it as an insane amount of articulation on this particular figure. I read somewhere that it had like over 90 points of articulation. I don't know if that's accurate. I'm not going to go down there and count every single point of articulation, but I do remember like the hands having like half of the articulation. So the fingers were articulated. It came with some extra face plates that I think were a part of some tier levels. I will say this one's a really interesting one because there weren't really that many crazy stretch goals, and the price point was actually pretty reasonable. It's about $200, which is actually not that bad if you sit down and do the math compared to other Haslab projects that have been astronomically high in price. This one seemed, at least in my personal opinion, readily affordable. However, in turn, you obviously didn't get as many different bonuses or any extra tiers. I mean, there were tiers, but it was mostly just face plates and things of that nature, which was kind of disappointing. But again, $200. There were no extra, big like action figures that they added in there. And then a lot of people were complaining about the price point, things of that nature. I think it was, pretty accessible. $200 is slightly overpriced for what I would like to pay for it, but it's not like a crazy amount. Like, they're not just, stealing your money out of your wallet. Like, I think it was definitely some value there. In terms of what it's selling for in the third party, I checked some eBay listings and they're pretty consistent. Even with like shipping and taxes and everything, you'll probably be paying around like low 400s to about like 420, 430. So again, do the math in your head. You're paying roughly about like $130 to about $150 extra through the third-party market. So if you weren't able to get it originally, I don't think it's like that huge of a markup. I guess kind of, as I said, it depends on your financial situation, but $400 out the door, you may be able to get some deals if you like make some offers to some of these sellers. Maybe they're desperate enough to get rid of theirs. Maybe they bought like extras here and there. And I know a lot of toy stores here locally and across the US probably do that pretty consistently. They buy multiples to try to flip them later. So I'm sure that you'll be able to find some solid deals deals at like maybe $350 in person. You have to account for the fact that a lot of these eBay sellers have to pay for shipping, they have to pay for eBay fees. And so if you're able to find a seller locally there near you, you may be able to pay closer to like the $300 price point. So they're only making about like $100 off of you. Next up, I thought we would take a look at probably potentially one of the biggest Haslab projects ever, and that is the Galactus Marvel Legends action figure, which originally launched way back in 2021. It's roughly about 32 inches tall. It came with quite a few different stretch goals or tiers. A number of different action figures were included with Galactus. It also had some light up LED features. I mean, it's safe to say that they went all out when it came down to this figure, and the price point definitely reflects that. You were technically paying about $400, but there were a lot of incentives to try to purchase this figure. If you're looking to purchase it now, which is, a few years later, you can still pick it up for relatively decent prices. I've seen it for as low as like $600. This was one of those really weird figures that people actually bought multiples of. I remember going into my local toy shops and seeing like 2 to 3 of these on display. So I'm assuming some of these people that were trying to resell this particular figure maybe ended up holding them for too long, and there's still value there. I mean, most of these guys are still going to be able to make their money, but I would personally, as I said with the previous entry, I would probably try to purchase this in person. You just save on shipping and eBay fees, and the seller can pass those savings on to the customer. And there's not, like I said, there's not a lot of demand. There's not a ton of people fighting over the collectibles that are available at the moment, and so this is definitely, I feel like it's a buyer's market at this point. Next up, we have the Sentinel Haslab project, which, if I'm not mistaken, originally was retailing for about $350. If you're smart and you're patient, you should be able to pick this up for roughly about $600 on eBay. And I'm actually quite surprised at the price point through the third-party marketplace. I'm going to assume that it has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of people bought multiples of these, or there were at least a few consumers out there that were looking to army builds with these. Maybe not 10 to 12 of these, but at least like 2 to 3, maybe even 4. And there may be even newer collectors that are interested in army building with these, and I think that has led to the demand for this particular collectible or this figure, which compared to, like, for example, the Galactus, where you would only pick up one for your display, for Sentinels, like I said, there may be quite a few collectors out there that at least buy 2 to 3 of these. So there's definitely quite some demand. I will say the 2 figures that came with this particular Sentinel, which are the 2 like 6-inch Sentinel figures, those alone, like brand new, quote unquote brand new, because they really didn't come in packaging, they just came in like a plastic sleeve. But if they're in like really brand new condition, these are going for roughly about like $100 to $120. So just keep an eye on that. If you're interested in picking those up, that's usually the going rate for them. Or if you're interested in just getting rid of the figures themselves, maybe you just wanted the Sentinel, you can make or recoup some of the money that you probably spent on it, at least $100. That'll go back into your wallet. Next up, we have the Star Wars Vintage Haslabs Star Wars ship. This originally retailed for about $350. If you're looking to purchase it at the moment, you're looking to pay about like a little over $600. And similarly to the Sentinel, there were 2 figures, if I'm not mistaken, that were exclusive to the Razor Crest. It was that Elder Jawa Star Wars Vintage action figure, as well as a Grogu Star Wars Vintage action figure. So both of those are exclusive. You can only get them if you happen to purchase the Razor Crest. And those very similarly to the Haslab project or the Sentinel Haslab project. They're going for roughly about like 100 to up to about like 120. Those I think go a little bit more, even though they're a smaller scale and they're Star Wars Vintage. They're usually much cheaper figures, but these actually came in a retro card, which is something that's really cool. I don't think that they usually do that for the Marvel Legends Haslab projects. If there's like an extra tier level action figure, they don't usually include it like in an actual packaging. They're usually just in plastic sleeves. I'm just going to assume that it cuts into the budget because it's probably much heavier to ship something that has a bigger retro card or way more cardboard, and also it's just way more expensive to actually add some extra packaging in there as a whole. It just cuts too much into the budget. Whereas in the Star Wars Vintage line, you're looking at tiny little like 3 3/4 inch action figures, and so it just makes way more sense to have those. And usually the Star Wars vintage line, for the most part, is just a lot more collectible and or a lot more sought after in a retro card, whereas in a lot of the other lines like Marvel Legends are usually, you know, displayed open and people just crack the packaging open. So it's somewhat frustrating if you're a Marvel Legends collector and you wish those tier level action figures came in like actual packaging. But like I said, it's understandable just because they're bigger, they're going to include way more cardboard, and it's just going to cut too much into, you know, the shipping costs and just overall production of the figures. But I've definitely wasted enough of your time, enough of my saliva, and an insane amount of oxygen. We're going to look at one last Haslab project, and that is the Ghost Star Wars vintage ship. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the most expensive collectible on today's list. This one originally retailed for about $500. If you're looking to purchase it right now, it's quite a hefty price point. You'll probably be paying close to about like $750, upwards closer to $800, just because, again, you have to include shipping and fees and taxes and all of that. So you're probably paying on the low end about like $750. Now, what was really fascinating about this particular Haslab, and I looked at a number of other ones, but what was really interesting here were the extra figures or the tiers that it came with. It was essentially the Ghost Crew, all four retro carded Star Wars vintage figures that were included here. If you're looking at buying just the set, because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think any of these have ever been released for the Star Wars vintage line, or maybe they have, but it's not like the correct versions for this particular ship. They're going for $350. Now you may find a bargain here and there for closer to $300, but with shipping and taxes and everything, you'll be paying upwards of $300. That's absolutely insane to me. So, you know, if you happen to have these extra and you're you know, banking on Hasbro potentially re-releasing these figures way down the line, then I guess you could sell them and recoup a little bit of that money, because as I said, $500 is nothing to scoff at. But just to put things into perspective, if you were to sell these and you were at least to make about $300 back, you're essentially paying it close to about like $200 to $250 for the Ghost ship, which I think is an absolute bargain. But again, you're banking on the idea that you could potentially find these retro carded Star Wars figures, or the Ghost Crew, if you will, later down the line. And I'm just not quite sure about that. I will say one thing. I like the idea that most of these are exclusive to the Haslab projects, and I do think that they should remain like that for a, you know, a good period of time. But I think eventually Hasbro, let's be brutally honest, they're going to re-release a lot of these quote-unquote Haslab exclusive tier level action figures. It's only a matter of time, and in some particular cases, some of these figures have some new pieces, whether it was like a new head sculpt or a new body or something new, and there's just no way that Hasbro doesn't decide to re-release them. That's just not the way that Hasbro does things. If they ever create a new body mold or a new character, they just love re-releasing it, you know, with alternate versions or alternate color schemes. And so, like I said, even though for the foreseeable future most of these Haslab exclusive tier level characters have not been made available, I think it's just a matter of time before we actually get them, whether it's in the Star Wars vintage line or the Marvel Legends line, but I think we'll eventually get them. So as you guys can see, regardless of what particular Haslab you're looking at, bare minimum, I think even if you purchase it in person, whoever it is that's selling it to you is probably going to make about $100 off of you. So just to do the math, if it's like a Sentinel at $350, or if, you know, the Ghost, let's say, if you're able to find somebody in person, they should be able to mark it up quite a bit. Like I said, including taxes and everything, they're probably going to make about $100 off of you. If you decide to buy it through eBay, there are eBay fees. There's, you know, shipping involved. They probably have to buy their own shipping supplies, or I don't know if they'll reship it in the same Corrugate box that Hasbro shipped it to them in. So, you know, maybe they save a little bit of money there, but shipping is very expensive. So just account for that. The person that's selling it to you probably isn't making like a massive profit. It's usually roughly about like 100 to about 120, maybe even 150, but they're not making a ton of money. So that being said, just a quick word of advice, probably buy it in person. A lot of these don't have like a huge demand. There's not a huge like market for them. Most people people that wanted the Galactus already have Galactus, and I think you're going to be able to find some really good deals out there. Same thing with the Razor Crest and the Ghost Ship. I think both of those, even though there was quite a bit of demand and a lot of people did purchase them, most of the people that bought them or that really wanted them already have them. You know, everybody else, you're not going to have to compete with hundreds or thousands of other buyers. Like I said, try to find it in person, and then you should be able to find some really good deals. But there you guys have it. I wanted to make today's video a little bit shorter than I usually make them. I don't want to ramble. I don't want to, you know, talk about too many Haslab projects. I thought this would be like a two-part video series. Today, we're just focusing on these particular Haslab projects. I want to make a secondary video where I talk about some Transformer Haslab projects, maybe some G.I. Joes, and potentially anything else that falls under the Haslab project umbrella. We might even do some Kickstarter projects, whether it's from just regular OEMs or smaller OEMs, or we might even do one for McFarlane, because he has been doing some Kickstarters here and there. But as always, if you guys enjoyed today's content, make sure to stay tuned, because we do upload like 4 to 5 different videos on a weekly basis. I have a ton of fun putting these videos together for you guys, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. You know, and you guys can always, you know, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts down below, because that always helps you know, give me ideas of what potential future content we can work on. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, make sure to enjoy the hobby, pose your action figures, take photographs with them, whatever it is that you do, just enjoy them. That's the most important part of all this. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.